Looks like we're good.
Can anybody see my screen?
Yep,
Yeah,
I can.
I see your screen.
What are you
Yes.
seeing?
See your head with the arch ceiling behind you.
No, I mean, I'm sharing my screen. You see that?
Yep.
Oh,
Yeah,
hell.
I see your Acrobat. Yeah.
Yeah, and then Dennis, if you go to view full screen mode. All right, it looks like we got 24 attendees.
Oh boy.
I got an issue here though.
I just
What is your
promoted
issue,
Leon.
Dennis?
Hello?
Is that Leon?
Yeah. Can you
Yes.
see me? Can you hear me?
I can hear
Hear
you.
you.
My wife is trying to get set up here. Thank you. Okay.
There you are.
Okay. Hey, David.
Hey, how are you?
Good, thank you. Hey, how are you?
That mustache is superb, sir.
There's the beard, sir.
Can you guys see the beginning of the PowerPoint?
I can.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, good.
All right. Welcome everybody to. We ready?
Sorry, just about.
Okay. Okay. Sorry.
All right, we're good.
We're good. Welcome everybody to the June 10th, 2020 BAR Large virtual meeting. My name is David Hazelden. Other board members present this afternoon are James Meadows, Jay White, Leon Scott. City staff present, City Architect Dennis Dowd and Alex Howell. The order of the meeting will be as follows. There will be an introduction and overview of each project by city staff to the board and for the public. Applicant presentation and any questions of the applicant will follow the introduction. That will be limited to 15 minutes. There will be a 2-minute warning given by Mr. Dowd to wrap up your presentation. Any and all presenters for an applicant should clearly state your name for the record. Persons affiliated with the project, owners, developers, designers, consultants, anybody of the like, should speak during this portion of the meeting rather than public comment section. Board questions can follow will follow the applicant presentation. That will be followed by public comment. This will be limited to 15 minutes, divided equally among the public. Applicant does not respond to the comments made during the public comment. Any member of the public speaking, I would ask you to clearly state your name for the record. Following public comment will be city staff comments and recommendations. Following that, the applicant will have an opportunity to respond or clarify to public comment and/or the city staff comments and recommendations. This time frame will be limited to 5 minutes. Following this will be board discussion and vote. I would ask that anybody, I don't know if we have this issue now, but turn off cell phones and other devices, and remember to please limit your comments this afternoon to architecture only. Comments related to zoning, parking, traffic, lot coverage, livability are not in the purview of this board and cannot be voiced here. Thank you. With that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Dowd.
Okay, and this is just, some information that people had available on the website when they signed up to speak at the meeting or submit any documents, which we had some trouble with. So we have taken all those documents and given them to the chair, and they'll be read during the public comment period. Just a little bit of information here about the meeting protocol for applicants especially. And I'm getting a message, my internet is unstable, which is distressing. So if I lose you, we'll just have to deal with it. But staff will control the PowerPoint presentation, and that includes everything submitted by the applicant by the deadline in accordance with the submittal requirements. And Applicants simply need to ask me to advance to the next slide during your presentation. Applicants, staff, and board members are required to give their name whenever speaking. Please try to remember that as much as possible. Video and microphone have been disabled for all attendees. Attendees, not board members or staff, will only be given the capability to speak when they are called on during the public comment period. The chat and Q&A functions have been disabled for everyone. In the public comment period, the applicant and all applicant team members and the public have been required to register, indicate the project they wish to comment on.
Dennis?
I think we lost him.
And those members of the public that have registered will be called on in order by project. And members of the public that speak are encouraged to remain in the meeting for the completion of the item they've commented on. I'm sorry?
We lost you for a few seconds and the share screen stopped
Alex?
working.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, great. So where should I go back to?
I think you were talking about the applicant register. And then you'll need to share the screen again.
Okay, well, during the public comment period, it's not shared now?
No, when your internet froze, we lost it. Or when your screen froze, we lost your shared screen.
Can you see it now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, the applicants and all applicant team members and the public have been required to register, indicate the project they wish to comment on, and submit any documents in advance of the meeting. Just as in an in-person meeting, all applicants heard today are part of a public meeting format. So register and will speak during the public comment portion of the meeting. You'll need to state your name and address for the record. I'll ask the chairman to remind people of that by project. And we ask that all members of the public that speak remain in the meeting for the completion of the item they're speaking on, in case the board has any questions. And staff will call on the registered members of the public to speak for each project. Unregistered members of the public who raise their hand will not be called on. We having trouble again, Alex?
You went in a little bit, went out a little bit, but you're okay.
All right. Board members should open the participants panel so that each board member can see the status of other board members' microphones and cameras. Board members will be polled by the chair for comments and for their vote on a motion. Each member, when voting, should respond yay in favor or nay not in favor, and shall read, and the board member making the motion should correct the chairman if he has not read the motion. Remember, needs in the back of the meeting at the start of the next agenda item. And if the board needs to go into executive session, which I don't anticipate, staff will issue meeting results, including staff comments and board motion, to the applicant following the meeting. And those results will be posted on the city website also. And with that, I'll say that this proceedings are being recorded. Alex, have you started the recording?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so we're at agenda item number 1. This is a formality. It's an extension of a previously approved project. The board has no choice but to approve the extension. It's a 1-year extension of the conceptual approval for new construction of 4 single-family attached dwellings, requesting additional half-floor based on architectural merit and context, originally granted on June 13, 2008. in Charlestown, Lake District 2.5, in the old historic district 7, 9, and 11 Ashley Boulevard for approval of the extension.
Well, I assume there's no presentation to this because of the formality. So this is Jay. I'll make a motion for approval of the extension.
I will second.
Who was that? Leon?
This is
Was that
Leon
you
Scott.
that
I'm sorry.
seconded? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And this, Mr. White, was a motion for approval of the extension, correct?
That's correct.
All right. How do you vote, Mr. White?
Yay, in favor.
All right. Mr. Scott, what's your vote?
Yay, in favor.
Mr. Meadows, how's your vote?
In favor.
Could you repeat that?
Yay, in favor.
All right. And this is David Hazelden. And my vote is yay, in favor. Mr. Dowd?
Am I back?
Yes.
You are.
This is an issue. Okay. Next up is 4 to 6 Gadsden Street, requesting preliminary approval for new construction of 4 townhouses in Charleston Village, Height District 3, and the Old and Historic District.
Dennis, you'll need to share the screen again.
Oh, man. Bear with me.
Dennis, one suggestion might be to change to not do the background because that might be using up bandwidth.
Yeah. Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay. So this is 4 to 6 Gadsden Street, requesting preliminary approval for new construction of 4 townhouses in Charleston Village, Height District 3, and the Old and Historic District. Oh, mama. Okay, so it's the corner of Buffane and Gadsden. There's a historic house there that had structural damage and had to come down about 3 or 4 years ago. This is the site after the removal of the house. Gadsden and Buffane looking northeast, and then looking southwest at the corner, and then looking east on Buffane, and north on Gadsden, and south on Gadsden. Previous motion was conceptual approval with staff recommendations and board and staff comments in January of this year. Board comments, one member said stair extension does not diminish the proposal. A lot of different scale in the neighborhood. Do not agree with staff comment number 5. All other conditions I agree with. Another board member agreed that the rooftop will not adversely affect the project. Windows over doors should be taller, and the bays as rectangular might refer to porches better. Third board member agreed with staff comments, indicated the project was beautiful and well done, and was fine with the board comments. And with that, I will turn it over. Alex, if you could unmute the applicant for them to make their presentation. And Mr. Schmidt, you can go ahead if you're unmuted now. Joe Schmidt with us?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, we last presented this project to you back in January, I believe. We believe all the comments that have been brought up. We did a lot of restudy on the project. Probably the biggest change that we made is the actual exterior structural system. The skin of the building has gone from a wood stud with stucco and score lines to a brick veneer project. We did make the adjustment on the size of the window over the front door was a comment. We did study square bays, however, believe that the angled bays are a more appropriate solution for this project. Our main thrust since the last meeting was to further study and increase the quality of the building materials on the project and answer some other questions that were very conceptual at the time. Front steps, what were they made of? They will be bluestone treads on a stucco base for that. That'll be formed concrete and then stuccoed and then bluestone treads. That will be a limestone surround on the, and Dennis, you probably need to be jumping up to like slide 36. I don't think I need to go through all the bird's eye stuff.
Okay. 36, Joe.
36. Yeah, I apologize.
Oh, boy. This is not good.
What's the existing version of this? You can't get any of them up? What's the existing proposed number? How about, if it's a numbering problem, how about 18?
No, it's not. It's not. It's an internet problem. Which number, Joe?
18 gives you prior and current, and then 36 is just current, but I think 18 might be of more value since we're really talking about a lot of subtleties.
Alex,
Yes.
are you the, how about if you open up this PowerPoint and share the screen?
Okay.
I'm going to stop the share because I'm having big time internet problems here.
Is it the one that was saved at 411? I'm guessing.
Yes. It's a PDF.
Okay.
I apologize to everyone. I'm not sure why I haven't had a problem with the internet ever. Which slide, Joe, do you want to go to?
18 is good.
Okay.
So
Maybe
just because they,
Sorry.
Full screen, yeah.
just because the time lag and the fact that all of our work has really been in the subtlety of addressing the exterior skin of the project without really changing the massing. The concepts that were being discussed that were wanted were that the whole bay system be done in metal, and it is. We are working with a Marvin window system, and they are going to engineer that whole two-story facade, assemble it, and then deassemble it and bring it to the site so that it reads as one giant unit in pre-finished aluminum. The building went from stucco on the top of the screen to a brick on the bottom. The brick has not been selected. The brick could be a natural brick that is approved or a painted brick. And we realize you don't have that yet. We weren't even able to get it to you because of the circumstances of the application deadline. But that's the objective with the brick was that we were going to do it in brick veneer so that we would avoid the score lines of the stucco. On the stucco system, that would have been a stucco cornice at the top of the page. Now it is a wood and metal system on the cornice this time. It was a metal coping on the top of the building prior. It is now a cast stone coping. The surround for the front door is going to be a natural stone, a limestone. And the objective for this is that the limestone will return all the way back to the door, so the whole pocket will read as a limestone entry. The front steps were just cast concrete before, and now they are going to be a finished stucco steps with bluestone treads, stucco risers. The gates on the front of the building, we had replicated the original gate, which is the second one from the left, is the original location of the original gate for the project. And we had replicated that design exactly. And at the request of the board and reconsideration, we have simplified the other gates so that the original gate would be more ornate and much more obvious to the eye. The retaining wall at the sidewalk is the existing retaining wall. However, the last 20 feet or so toward the right side of the screen is a replication of what's missing. There was no fence or retaining wall in that location when the original project was done because there were a series of garages where all the carriages were pulled off of the street on that side. So this is the only side of the building of the original housing, the original house project that you actually entered onto the site, and that was at this lower corner. That's kind of an important point to make because now we're going to be entering from Gadsden Street, and there is an existing pier setback on Gadsden Street that seems to be of some confusion is because we are having to remove it. It's not original. It was only put in there much later. I would say as late as the 60s. It's just a stucco concrete block. We're removing that because we need a wider entrance for the fire department. If you flip to the next, you would have to go to sheet 40. Shows the landscape plan, and you can see the width of the driveway 40. There you go. We have to have the wider width for the fire department, much wider than what's there now. What's there now is only 12 feet, maybe 15 feet max, and they wouldn't accept that. You will see on that north side, there's also another gate, a pedestrian gate. It's more in line with the back of the building. That is the original pedestrian gate for the original project, and we're retaining that one. I don't know that it'll ever be used by anybody. There's no real purpose, but we're definitely leaving that in there. If you would go to, is there prior and existing of the plan that shows your balconies? They have to be on the same sheet. Well, they're not. It's impossible. Okay. Then, if you don't mind, go to sheet 43. You're close to it. We changed there was a question about whether there should be a fourth porch on the first unit close to Gadsden. We studied it. We just don't believe that's necessary. We've followed the request to add up the the porch on the Gadsden street side, and putting another porch on the back made no sense. We did, however, change the spacing on the back porches of unit 2, 3, and 4, column spacing, and we think that is a great enhancement so that it's not being confused with your typical piazza spacing. These are actually porches that are suspended 2 stories in the air. And we followed that same pattern at the request of Dennis up to the roof line for the rooftop deck, which we will have to go to sheet 49. You can see how we've broken that spacing down. There you go. On those, before they were more equally spaced, and we sort of took that upon ourselves. It wasn't a comment that was asked of the board, but it's something we felt seemed to fit a lot better with the wider opening on the ground level, not to just have 4 equally spaced columns up there. All those garage doors are recessed 6.5 feet from the face of the building, which does a great job of screening those portals from the street. There was a question at the last meeting about the rooftop, and Lee Batchelder did address it, and he accepted this. We don't have to get a variance to meet that for being a half story. And I believe everybody on the board was of the opinion, as we were, that they would be significantly recessed from the street. We met with the neighborhood multiple times, including after the BAR, so they're very much aware of this application, and I believe everybody is in full support. In the interest of time, I'd be happy to address any questions and forfeit any time I have.
Thank you, Mr. Schmidt. Any questions?
I have one, David.
Certainly.
Joe, how high is the ceiling of the rooftop stair area?
Hang on a second. It is as minimum as we could. I believe it's, give me 1 second. I want to say it's 7.5.
Okay.
We've depressed that as much as possible. And the other thing, 7.5 feet, yes. And the other thing we've done, that lower portion you see to the left side of every one of those,
yeah,
that is dropping to the stair landing level as it's coming up on a scissor stair. Again, trying to diminish that mass as much as we possibly could.
okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Hearing none. Public comment?
Okay, so Alex, how many public comment letters do we have, and how many people to speak?
We have 2 letters and 2 people to speak.
Okay, so let's have the people speak first, and then the chair can read the letters.
Okay. I have Will Hamilton, and I will allow him to speak. And Will, you can unmute yourself.
Great. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Thank you. This is Will Hamilton with the Historic Charleston Foundation. I want to start by thanking the applicant for allowing us to review this preliminary design ahead of this afternoon's meeting. The foundation is generally comfortable with the changes to this application. We're supportive of modifications to the material palette, the more prominent brick coins, along with the changes to the design for the new gates and their orientation on the property. Moving forward, we would like to have the opportunity to review color samples for the proposed materials prior to the application receiving final approval. But again, we're comfortable recommending preliminary approval and look forward to reviewing the proposed color palette during the next phase of the design review process. Thank you.
You.
Next, we have Aaron Minigan. And Aaron, you can unmute yourself.
Thanks. Erin Minigan, Preservation Society of Charleston. The Preservation Society feels the design has progressed in a positive direction, but is concerned about the lack of information on the material and color palettes at this stage of preliminary review. It's unclear from the application materials what the materials will actually look like, especially given the most recent change to brick. We would ask for clarification from the architect on the intended material colors and finishes to inform the board's decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more comments from people in the queue? Ms. Howell?
No.
Okay. There are two letters from what appear to be neighbors. The first one is from Miss Susan Lyons, 7 Gadsden Street. She states that I live at 7 Gadsden Street across the street from the property, whose applicant Joe Schmidt and owner JHH Investments are seeking approval. The owners and the applicants have been exceptionally diligent in discussing the plans for this project with a significant number of neighbors, meeting with us several times. As a result, the plans have evolved to reflect many of our preferences and to respond to our concerns with the landscape plan that was made available this week. The project has a pleasing appearance and design that fit nicely into the greater Buchanan-Gadsden streetscape. I would urge your approval of this carefully crafted project without any further changes. Respectfully, Susan Lyons. Second note is from Ann and Trav Auburn. My husband and I live at 12.5 Gadsden Street, just north on Gadsden from the property being considered before the BAR large. Over the past several months, we've participated in a number of meetings with the applicant architect builder concerning the plans for the corner of our neighborhood. We came to understand their perspective and appreciation of what they were trying to achieve with the proposal of the townhouses being presented. They were attentive to our concerns and have responded to them as they revise the design. We support the approval of the proposal being presented. And would be both letters or all the letters public. Mr. Dowd?
Okay, I will confirm that the zoning administrator has determined that the extra height on the roof is zoning compliant, although it does appear slightly taller than previous. As Joe mentioned, the project is now clad in brick versus stucco, which we view as a major upgrade. The gates have been modified and are now differentiated from the historic gate. The project details are generally nicely executed. A few conditions were mentioned by the board last time as part of your motion that haven't been incorporated. Adding another porch above the garage to the westernmost unit. Alex, can you bring up the staff comments here so people can see them as we go? Okay, so I'm on number 4 here. Adding another porch above the garage to the westernmost unit to achieve the same result as the other units in recessing the garage. This seems unnecessary to us given the ample recess of the garage doors. The original historic pier at the driveway should remain on the Gadsden Street side of the project. Joe mentioned it's probably 60s vintage, which would make it historic, and we feel that it should remain and perhaps, if possible, reconfigure the entry into the driveway there. Stucco heads, sills, belt courses and cornices should be actual stone, and also the parapet cap should be stone rather than metal. Staff feels that for consistency of material and appearance, all stone should be limestone to match the surround at the entryways. Also, the cornice should be stone versus wood. Study reducing the height of the rooftop stair hall appurtenances as much as possible. eliminating skylight would help reduce the parapet height. The windows in the foundation on the west elevation should be eliminated as they look into the garage. The details of the bay should all be of the same metal as the windows, including the wood sill. Limit light fixtures to one at each porch on the west elevation. Metal roofs are called out only as metal. As a new building, they could be aluminum, but would be best as traditional hand crimp standing seam to be contextual. The windows should be simulated divided light. Synthetic stucco at the downspout recesses should be veneer brick for durability. And the aluminum porch railing should not have exposed fasteners. And just a note about materials, you know, given the fact that we're doing virtual meetings at this point, it's difficult to get, you know, obviously to get physical samples to look at. We would encourage the applicant at final to submit good photographs of the materials, and then the board will have an opportunity and the public to view the materials at the mock-up panel and make final choices and decisions then. So we're recommending conceptual approval with the conditions noted.
Mr. Schmidt, any response or clarification on any of the public comments or city staff comments and recommendations?
I would ask foremost, I think, for reconsideration on the concept of doing the cornice on this project in stone. I understand how the city is trying to feel like they're upgrading materials on all projects, but that needs to be kind of in context. I can't imagine maybe the Baker House is, but this is a residential neighborhood, and while we're doing a nice job with the limestone base and the limestone surround on the front door, putting stone up there at that height just seems out of context to the choice of materials and the single family residential feel of this neighborhood. That would be my only thought consideration. We've projected out a very nice cornice, and if we try to put stone up there projected on a brick veneer, I'm sure it can be done. It's nothing that I would feel that comfortable with. So for that reason, I would suggest, since we followed a very traditional system using wood, that we do that in wood and not stone.
Thank you, sir. Any discussion? And I'll just remind the board members that if you make comment or ask a question or anything, just make sure to identify yourself.
And Mr. Chair, I just want to mention that the applicant's microphone is going to remain open during board discussion for the purpose of allowing people generally, if they decide up until the time a motion is made that's what we need to.
Ms. Dow, could you repeat that? We lost you halfway through. I believe last we heard was you would leave the microphone of the applicant on for purposes of, I guess would be, go ahead.
For purposes of allowing them to withdraw the project prior to a motion, if they decided they wanted to do that. I don't expect that to happen, but generally we need to do that for every project. Allow the applicant's mic to be open up until the time the board makes a motion.
Okay, thank you.
Can you hear that?
Yes.
Okay.
Comment?
Hey, James, you're muted. I see you talking.
Sorry about that. I just wanted a clarification on conceptual versus preliminary. Dennis said conceptual.
I'm sorry, preliminary, my mistake.
Well,
So-
I can throw well, go ahead, James, go ahead.
Well, I want to, it's an educational process for all of us. And I'm very interested to, Dennis, if you could help identify the items that you would expect to know in terms of material on the exterior of the building at preliminary that are not identified on the plans. And we've already reviewed them, but just in summary, because I think it's important to recognize the list of things that we are saying because we're going virtual and it's difficult that we're going to kind of let that go. I'm not sure that I heard that right, but I want to make sure I understand what your thoughts are on that again.
Well, we're not planning on letting it go. I'm recommending that at final review, they bring in good photographs of the anticipated materials for the board to review, but that you would also opportunity a review of the mock-up to make final materials, which is, typically what we've done forever. Given the COVID situation is difficult, we can't see physical materials. But the critical materials would be anything that's not, usual, ordinary. So we'd be looking for, a sample of the stone, the cast stone, any metal at the windows and so forth. It's not a big material palette on this project, so it wouldn't be an extensive review of materials. They're pretty standard materials, but sometimes, things like limestone can vary. So you'd want to see that for sure.
And I get that. So there's not, I didn't think there was a significant difference now versus if Joe was standing in front of us talking to us right now.
Yeah.
In terms of material.
Well, I think if we didn't have this situation where we had to do this virtually, he would have brought in samples of the brick, the limestone, some other materials for you to review in hand. We didn't do that, but we can do it at final with photographs.
So
and then
I just want to make
confirmation
sure that
at mock-up.
I think it's very important because I thought I understood what you just said to be the case, and I think that that's a significant modification to the normal procedure, and whether it's right now or it's in the future, maybe these things are pre-positioned somewhere for board members to go and look at them, because that's a significant part of what I think our responsibilities are, to look at these materials.
You broke up for me. I don't know if you did for anybody else, James, but I think if we ask them to give us given the situation and then review it at mock-up time.
Well, this is Jay. I kind of agree with that, and I think that the premise of upgrading the material, the building from stucco on frame to brick veneer is certainly a great improvement. And I generally agree with staff comments. I'm not certain that it's really critically necessary to change from cast stone to limestone at the cornice, or I'm sorry, at the parapet cap, because it's so high up. But aside from that one comment, which was, let me point out which one it was. Oh shoot. Really 4C. Aside from that, I support the project and I support the city's recommendation.
Jay, I didn't hear what you said about 4C.
That I feel like the cornice as proposed is probably fine considering the overall construction of the building.
Okay, thank you.
This is Leon Scott. I'm in agreement with staff recommendation.
Any other comment?
David, it's James. I agree with Joe's comments about the 4C. And I also don't think that they need to be actual stone.
So I'm going to introduce this is Jay again. I'm going to introduce a motion for preliminary approval with staff comments excepting 4C.
I would second that, David.
All right, so it's Jay White has made a motion for preliminary approval with staff comments accepting 4C. And James Metters, you've seconded that motion?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Scott, how do you vote?
I vote yay, in favor.
Mr. White, what is your vote?
Yay, in favor.
Mr. Meadows, what is your vote?
Yay, in favor.
And this is David Hazelton. I vote yay in favor. Motion passes 4-0. All right. Moving on.
Can anybody hear me?
Yes,
Yes, I can anyway.
I can.
My internet keeps going in and out. I've been having these and it's really acting up. If necessary, we'll have Alex continue, but I'll start. Next up is 194 Cannon Street Hotel, requesting conceptual approval for new construction of a 175 room hotel. No particular neighborhood, Height District 85, 125 in the old city district. Next slide, Alex. Oh, Alex, can you go to the next slide? This is bad.
Let's see if he will come back.
Did we lose Dennis?
Looks like it.
I'll continue introducing. So this is the context of the site between Spring and Cannon Street at Bond Street, just before the bridge. There's a former Wendy's on this site, photo from Cannon Street and from Spring Street. And a few more context photos looking toward the west, toward West Edge development. And looking east. And I will promote the applicants for their presentation. Okay, I've promoted Richard Gow, J.R. Kramer, and Jeffrey Ringling. And y'all can unmute yourselves. And if you have camera, you can turn on your camera.
Dennis, you're muted. Oh, here we go. It's on the other screen.
Alex, can you hear me?
Yes.
I've restarted the internet, but if it happens again, you're going to have to take over and read the staff comments. So
Okay.
sorry about that. I know it's a lot to manage, but I can't help it.
All right, at this point, the applicants can make their presentation.
Okay. Alex, if you can advance the next slide, please. So this is Jeffrey Rendering. So looking at the Sanborn maps showing, back over around 50 years and no historic buildings on this site still remain. We did receive approval for demolition of the Wendy's building that is currently on site. Next slide, please. Richard.
So I wanted to make a statement and thank the board and the staff for the extra work that they're putting in to make this happen. We are here representing our client who has had this land for some time, and every month that has gone by has cost him money, and I really appreciate the extra effort for everybody to do this. The very interesting thing about the context of this site is that it's a large open space between two roads. About 65,000 cars a day travel by here. Not many pedestrians right now, but the reason that this site exists is because it's eventually intended to be a major north-south across Cannon and Spring walkway for the West Edge and MUSC employees. But when you look at these photographs of these two sites, it's largely one-story buildings inside of parking lots and a multiple skins. Whether you look at the picture on the left, there's the MUSC garage and central energy plant. There's an old hotel. There's the B Street lofts. And then on the photo on the right, you see West Edge, which is much more contemporary. And then several, a hotel there in the middle. And then on the right is the Summerall Center, which has very small stacked windows, and then the probably the only steel garage in the county to the right of it. So we felt like what our challenge was to do on this site, which is really sitting out here as a true gateway, is to take the crosstown, which is, we all know from the 60s, a very difficult part of the history of the neighborhoods being cut up. And if you look at that crosstown and what's been done to it by the city, to enhance it, to make it beautiful with the landscaping, we feel like our major role here is to do as much as we can to keep the buildings as small and lithe and away from the roads as possible, to allow the landscape gesture, which you can see in the park to the west, and the plantings that are very attractive along the major parts of the crosstown, to connect. And the buildings in the middle occupy less than 40% of the site, at least on the hotel. And we feel like that is a very important part of what we are trying to do. This is not a typical infill site down on King or Cannon or the lower parts of the historical more historical part of the community. So I'm going to say that and then let Jeffrey kind of keep going.
Next slide, please, Alex. So here's some site context photos. Alex shared some, but we want to share a couple other ones. If you go up to sheet 4, I think it's skipped twice on our end. The photo on the left there is from that Cannon Street connector, looking at the park, the city-owned park that was just recently done, and it's beautiful. And a couple things we wanted to point out was the little green buffer between the street and the sidewalk. And as you see on the image on the right, this is directly outside of our site here. The sidewalk is right onto the street, right next to the street. So there's something we want to carry on is from the park, that language of the landscape buffer as we go through our site. Go to the next slide, please. I think also the note why we look through these is, is it like Richard was saying, it's a very prominent site, it's a gateway site. It's going to be viewed from different heights and angles. We'll see these in the photos here. So the one on the left is on Spring Street heading towards West Ashley. Our site is just beyond the billboard there that's existing, and that's actually part on the other site that we'll see later on today as well. So the building will rise up behind that and to the right of that billboard. On the right side there, again, looking back from the MUSC garage across Cannon, looking at the Wendy's currently and West Edge beyond. Next slide, please. So like I said, on one on the left here, that is a view from the bridge. We asked our summer intern not to walk into the street, take the photo. So this is kind of tucked to the right side, but as you'll see, it's going to be seen from 20 feet up in the air as well as at the ground level. And then on the right here is looking at Bond Street, which is the far east extent of both the sites at 194. Next slide. We wanted to share some views up at 120 feet height, which is what we're allowed to do at the site here. And the one on the left, obviously, is looking towards the West Ashley River. And you can see how the site is very well framed from the larger buildings in the larger context of West Edge on the right and B Street apartments on the left, as well as being framed by the bridges in the connector road. And on the right, you look down there and see kind of a completely different context. Obviously, the one on the left is very tall and built up. The one on the right is, like Richard was saying, small 1-2-story buildings in a sea of parking. And then beyond those trees, we'll get back into residential neighborhoods. So our design is looking at responding to both of this context. Next slide, please. So I just want to run through a couple of our principal designs that we've been asking ourselves. Obviously, we have tremendous views. There's nothing that's built around us. We are able to capture views of the West Ashley River and Ravenel, especially on the upper floors, which is very important to us. And you can see that kind of through the curtain walls on the ends and later on in the presentation. Pedestrian connection, as we've been mentioning, we want to enhance that. As our little access driveway is created and the future road gets connected from West Edge development to MUSC, we see a lot more pedestrians coming across the street, and we want our building to be inviting and to accommodating them. Also, it is a loft, so how do we respond to the hotel branding, but be contextual about it and be appropriate to Charleston? As Rich also said, 65,000 cars drive past here, so majority of this building is going to be experienced in the vehicle. So how can the facade build off of that energy and respond to it? Connecting to the landscape is very important to us. As we were saying, we want to continue the park from the west through our site and down into the garage site as well. But we're also looking at enhancing the park that's there and having our building kind of sit within in that park. 6 minutes left. Oh, sure. Next slide, please. Here's some selected precedents that we looked at. Obviously, West Edge on the top and bottom left, and you'll see in the bottom middle there. But we also thought the Dewberry and the Spectator were important to look at. The Dewberry, having a lot of verticality in the windows and the fenestration of the new renovation, kind of highlighting that up. And the wood warmth of the first floor is something we also wanted to bring into. Next slide, please. Looking at hotel precedents, the biggest thing here is there's not one shoe fits all, right? So it very contextual. It can be very loose on their desires. Next slide, please. So precedents we looked at, obviously wanted to, we have a tall, skinny building as part of our design and massing strategy. So we wanted to enhance the verticality by grouping windows together. And we looked at several precedents that highlight that as well. Next slide, please. So the top three kind of respond to the site. Again, it's squeezed in between these two bridges, and the appropriate massing we found was to keep the building slender, which we'll see in the site and elevations to talk about further, but and then drop down a lower mass that welcomes from the west. So as you come across the Cannon Street Bridge there, you'll be welcomed by a lower contextual size mass. And then the tall, slender building presents itself a little bit more narrow and less intrusive. On the ground there, kind of responding to the lobby or to the program on the bottom level, shifting the lobby space out, allowing that to relate back to the residential groups to the right, and also very glassy, very light and airy. As you approach that site from the east, you'll be drawn into the activity of the lobby space. Next slide, please. And just looking, we wanted the buildings to read similarly, but also be distinct in themselves. So we kind of have similar, obviously similar materials throughout both towers, both masses, but the architecture is articulated, the details are articulated differently. Next slide.
So you can see the site plan has a predominance of open space on the south side where the sun is, and where we want to encourage as much pedestrian activity with the garage on the right and the connectivity to the plaza for the hotel on the left. The pedestrian movement is more up and down on this sheet, and the cars are side to side on this sheet. And so it's this kind of interesting duality and how the buildings might move. And remember, Cannon Street's one way, as is Spring. So you really get a lot of people seeing this from one angle at a certain speed. And we made a very strong effort on the site plan to move the building back and put the hotel lobby right where the sidewalk is going to be. And we met with West Edge, and we talked to them about people standing at that traffic light in the future, pushing a button and waiting and making that a pleasant experience. And so a lot of energy, and JR's team is very adept at making that a great experience.
Yeah, if we can go to the next slide, please. Looking at the floor plans, like Richard was saying, activating as much as possible with fenestration, locating program where along the street edge on the north and the right to highlight and to open those, make them more active, and then putting the back of house program in that kind of southwest corner where it would be kind of hidden by the berm that we were suggesting is built from the park. Next slide. Typical floor plates for hotels. I think you can kind of move through a couple of these quickly. Got more. All right. There's a roof plan. A couple early sketches, again, just showing the studies that we've done, looking at combining window heights, shifting floors, shifting plates. Continue on, please, Alex. Looking at the elevations. So this is the south elevation. Obviously modern detailing, but we're looking at combining multiple floors together and shifting them as you go up to bring some of that playful nature and not a static vertical building. But by combining...
I am not getting any of this. It keeps dropping on me, the connection. So you're gonna have to read the staff comments, but you'll need to open the Dowd version because there's an intro part that we need to mention. Can you? Okay. Where it says the project is in PUD. And yeah, I don't know what to do here. I've been having internet trouble. I got a guy coming tomorrow, but I've been having trouble for 4 days.
Dennis, we can hear you.
So I can't, I'm not hearing any of this. It's totally broken up and dropping off.
Yeah.
All right, I'll hang up. Thanks.
Alex, if you can go back one up to the south elevation, but again, just looking at combining the floors together by vertical windows and ribbons to emphasize the verticality of the building and to express that and to celebrate it. but also bringing some warmth down into the ground floor with some wood material. We'd love to do natural wood if possible. Facade is kind of made up of these sintered stone panels, very similar material. There's two stones, and they're just kind of a textural difference between the two stones to make the building a little flat. The darker zones that you'll see on the elevations, you can go to the next one, Alex, are the kind of hiding the mechanical screen louvers. So it's a detail that we're looking at exploring further with either perforated or vertical louvers to hide the mechanical equipment there. Down here, you can also see in the lower left corner that lobby space jutting out from the building, making itself known, but also genuflecting and respecting the residents to the left down the street. Next slide. To the west elevation is something we really are seeking support of the VAR if the direction is desired. And what we're trying to do here is enhance the park and actually berm up the ground and let the ground meet the building at the second level. This does two things for us. It hides the whole first floor program back a house that's undesirable really to look at, that needs to be there, but also allows the hotel rooms to sit in the park like setting and to really celebrate that park that the city has created. Next slide, please. This is the view of the east elevation as you approach from Spring Street, looking at the lobby, keeping it very glassy, very active, letting that expand to the west and throughout the building. We also have a low seat wall there. The site will ramp up. Low curb height is about 7 to the right, and our site will be around 9 feet. So the site will ramp up and allows us to kind of create this little seat wall that people can be out there and enjoy, or also wait to cross the street. And both ends, both east and west, are mostly done in curtain wall to capture those views and also keep the building very light and not heavy on that sides. Next slide.
Mr. Chairman, the 15 minutes is up, just to let you know.
All right, y'all, you could start wrapping it up very quickly.
Sure.
Mr. Rendron.
If you could go to the next slide. I think this is the section through that park, just showing that detail that we talked about. Next slide, please. On the north here, on the right side, you'll see that gracious setback we're doing with the building to create a nice soft space from the building to the vehicular traffic, as well on the west, the left side there. Next slide. Get into some of the renderings. Here's a view from that lower park view that we saw earlier. Street trees and everything are existing here, and you can see how the ground just rises up to meet the building and just really softens that building as it sits in the park. Next slide, please. A view up from the bridge. You can see that bermed earth a little bit clearer there, and the lower mass with the deep recesses on the lower mass to hide mechanical also brings a little bit of excitement into that facade. Next slide, please. A view from Spring Street as you're driving towards West Ashley, and this is kind of, it's tough to capture what the vehicle is going to see, but again, most of the time this building is not going to be seen straight on. It's going to be seen at an angle, but this building does cant just enough that as you drive past, you get to express a little bit more of that facade.
And it's in the shade.
And it's in the shade in this elevation, the north here. That is why it appears a little bit darker. Next slide, please. Looking from our garage, as you would come out of the garage, coming across into the hotel lobby area, again, you can see that nice warm wood entry, and then the nice landscaping that we're looking at, softening that courtyard space to the south. One more slide. This is the material palette that we're looking at. Center stone on the left with the 2 main field stones and the accent panel that's around the fitness center on the second floor. We're looking at elongated stacked brick around the base where it would not be wood, and then wood at the entry levels.
Thank you, and we'll take any questions you might have.
Thank you. Any questions from the board or Mr. Dowd?
No, my internet's so bad I missed most of the presentation.
Any questions from the board?
I don't have any.
I don't.
Hearing none, public comment. How you'll be helping us with that?
Yes, we have 3 speakers, and then several letters. So we'll start with Will Hamilton. Will, I've allowed you to speak and you can unmute yourself.
Thank you, Alex. This is Will Hamilton with Historic Charleston Foundation. Again, we'd like to thank the applicant for the opportunity to review the proposed design several weeks back. Historic Charleston is generally comfortable with the contemporary design in this location, and we look forward to becoming more familiar with the proposed material palette and the future extension of Haygood Avenue as the project moves forward. We also want to applaud the applicant for incorporating wider sidewalks and adding green spaces adjacent to the proposed hotel and garage. We feel these improvements to the public realm will be very beneficial to the pedestrian experience in this area. As far as the hotel itself goes, we know there are some taller buildings in this area. However, this design does seem overly vertical in the renderings and elevations provided in the submittal package. Moving forward, we'd like to see a few photos of a model with the other more prominent adjacent buildings in view, along with additional renderings showing the building as one would see it traveling east over the Ashley River Bridge to better understand the context of the area. We do feel this is a significant gateway site, which we feel necessitates more information related to the overall context of the area before we'd be comfortable making a recommendation for conceptual approval. We'd also like to see the west facade of the 6-story portion restudied to reflect something more visually interesting. We feel the current design for this portion of the building comes across as being somewhat brutalist. So for these reasons, we're recommending deferral to give the applicant an opportunity to restudy the overall height of the proposed hotel, the west facade of the 6-story portion of the structure in addition to the renderings, and to consider submitting images of a scale model showing a broader view of this area. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, our next speaker is Aaron Minigan. And I've allowed Aaron to speak and you can unmute yourself.
Thank you. Aaron Minigan, Preservation Society of Charleston. We would also like to thank the applicant for meeting with us and reviewing the proposal. However, we are opposed to this request, primarily due to issues with architectural direction. The proposed design is clearly being driven by the corporate hotel brand and is not responding to its context. This is an important gateway site for the peninsula, and it is critical for the architecture to relate to its unique setting in Charleston. Given the height of the building, we feel there is an even greater responsibility to utilize the highest quality materials and details. While the east and west facades are much more uniform and successful, the numerous materials and value engineered approach to the north and south facades creates an architecture that's incredibly jarring. Specifically, the VTAC air conditioning system has resulted in a large part of those facades being covered with black painted aluminum screening. Other proposed materials, including synthetic stone and storefront, are also disappointing. Examples of precedent buildings provided at the beginning of the application materials on page A.10 present a simpler and higher quality material palette that is far more successful. The Preservation Society is also concerned that the building's ground level will be completely devoid of urban activity. On Spring Street, there will be a long blank wall right up against the sidewalk, which is best seen on page 8.29, which we feel is inappropriate and not acceptable for frontage on this primary corridor. The BAR principles call for new construction to use authentic materials and abundant glazing, support high quality tactile and visual experiences at the pedestrian level, and utilize architectural language that enhances the public realm. We feel strongly this proposal does not meet those standards and urge the board to deny this request to allow for full reconsideration of the architectural approach. Thank you.
And our last speaker is Benjamin Linhart. And I've allowed you to speak and you can unmute yourself.
Thank you very much. My name is Ben Lenhart, and I live at 37 Church Street in Charleston. And I've had the pleasure of living in Charleston for now almost 20 years, and it's a special privilege for all of us. I think that 194 Calhoun Street, as is being presented, is not appropriate for this very important site. Because as just mentioned by the Preservation Society, this is an important welcoming entrance to Charleston for drivers coming from the south. Therefore, the structure needs to be impressive in all respects, including materials, and to be respectful of Charleston's architectural heritage. The proposed architectural drawings do not meet these objectives, particularly the facade. The facade appears mumbo jumbo with its massive window curtain walls constructed with various materials. This is the type of building that today you can see in Atlanta, Charlotte, and other large cities, none of which have the distinctive character of Charleston. I commend the developer for only occupying about 40% of the land mass and creating green space for the balance. I am confident also architects can create new drawings for a building that all of us would be proud to have visitors see as they approach our beautiful city. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Howell, is there any more, I guess, live public comment?
That is the extent of public speakers.
Okay, so everybody bear with me. I have a number of letters and emails related to this project. The first one being from Michael Mayer, CEO of the West Edge Foundation. Writing with response to the proposal of 149 Cannon Street. We would like to extend appreciation for the outreach and collaboration of the design team and engaging with the neighboring West Edge development. We concur that the redevelopment of the site presents a unique opportunity to make a significant improvement to an important but challenging location. The conceptual design approach is responsive to this opportunity. We understand this project is in conceptual review and look forward to seeing this project continue to be refined throughout the process. There is some language related to issues that are not architecture. He then goes on to say that it is important that the architecture and landscape design make such a connection a positive experience, including urban activation, complementary ground floor use, and fine-grained design and interventions. The design as presented makes very positive efforts to create a beneficial pedestrian environment with an active lobby and garden on the west side of the street and retail frontage on the east side of the street. Moving the parking garage entrance to the east face on the deck is a huge benefit to this connection as well. West Edge has embraced the challenges of infusing large-scale development with detailed, high-quality materials and human-scaled streetscapes. 194 Cannon proposals submitted for review appear to share this ethic, and we encourage the designers to retain their commitment to sustainability and long-lasting materials and architectural detailing. They look forward to further collaboration, look forward to the site becoming a contributory project that helps facilitate community connectivity, economic growth, and improves the site can bring to the surrounding context. Next, there is a letter from Marion Hawkins, president of the Cannonboro-Elliott Borough Neighborhood Association. The Cannonboro-Elliott Borough Neighborhood Association opposes this request. Concerning the proposal hotel design, we appreciate that the client wants interesting contemporary design rather than another background building. We'd be happy to see an elegant and distinctive contemporary building on this site. However, the current proposal is anything but elegant. It is loud and aggressive to an extreme. We would ask the team to work harder to develop a design that complements the historic district rather than shouts over it. Our neighborhood deserves a much better gateway than this. In summary, the Neighborhood Association does not support the proposed changes to this addition. Sincerely, Marion Hawkins. Next is a letter from J. Williams Jr. of 81 King Street. This is truly a tragic application for a too large building that is sited at the most prominent western gateway to the city. Its design is inimical to the built architecture of Charleston, inimical to Charleston's architectural heritage, and inimical of Charleston's culture. There's no objection to hiring architects who do not care about Charleston. Well, but it should be designing structures that would be built outside of our city, at the very least, and far less prominent part of our city. This design appears to be cost-saving proposal, giving the materials and design proposed. The building, to put bluntly, is hideous. I realize that some unfortunate exceptions have to be made to the size of this structure and for its use, but this building is too large for the space regardless. The size combined with the proposed design would, if not completely denied by this board, create specter of a giant wart on the city landscape. It would be a building that would live on in infamy. The humongous project is particularly offensive given that it is being presented to this board with so many cannot see designs, comment on them in person. He would ask the board to deny this application, ask the architect to study Charleston's built environment. J. Williams Jr. This is from Matt Dermanowski. I've lived in Charleston for quite some time now. He was upset to hear Sergeant Jasper being torn down and replaced. Its design is fitting within Charleston. This proposed design at 194 Cannon Street, this brutal avant-garde monstrosity does not say welcome to Charleston. I am 100% against this design of the hotel. It is not that I am against the hotel, but driving in and out of the city, Charleston is becoming unrecognizable. It could be in any other city. That is Matt Dermanowski. Okay, continuing, there is a letter from Kevin Eberly. I strongly oppose the plans for Cannon Street property because that parcel is a major gateway into Charleston. Any building needs to be a landmark for Charleston and not a warmed over branded building. The applicant is very specifically proposing a hotel that is very purposely reflects the aloft look and not good design. We have had several massive hotels added in Charleston in the last years. And I would ask the BAR large to hold any proposal up against all of those and ask whether it is more beautiful and interesting than the others. If not, it needs to be rejected. This is a prominent spot and it deserves a building that is nicer than any other ones added in a less prominent spot. Lastly, the BAR large is often faulted for not clearly dismissing bad design and instead deferring it with instructions to make tweaks. What we end up with is basically the original plan with few flourishes tacked on. I would like the BAR to flatly reject this proposal, instruct the applicant to return something completely different. Kevin Eberly. Moving on, a note from Frank Verga, 1618 Evergreen Street. This proposal needs to be denied. The traffic introduced into an already congested traffic flow housing. Charleston, he requests a proposal needs to be denied. The remainder of his comment is related to traffic. Franklin McCann at 51 Trad Street. We are so happy to live in a beautiful historic city with well-maintained city and want to maintain its integrity. The proposed hotel and garage will be another unnecessary eyesore to the city's beauty. We agree with the efforts and the criticism articulated by the Preservation Society of Charleston and urgently ask to deny the application. K. Cernkovich at 89 King Street. I stand with the Preservation Society and their request for denial of this application. The proposed architecture of the hotel does not meet the standards to which all construction in the city should be held. Please require new plans that meet both with the quality of materials and the design aesthetic Charleston deserves. Kim Ralph, 478 Hughie Street. Please do not allow this plan to be approved. We live on the peninsula for the past 20 years and want Charleston to remain Charleston. Please demand more from the developers. This is a gateway into our city and deserves a building that represents the excellence of Charleston architecture. Kelly Gilmore, 2140 Military Way. Please do not allow this hotel to be built at the base of the Ashley River Bridge. Charleston's charm is being chipped away by greed. Also, the traffic in this area is congested. We do not need another hotel in this area. This appears to be a cookie cutter hotel chain, corporate chain. The remainder relates to traffic and tourism. Joy Millar, 58 Lady Ann Lane. This proposal is simply heartbreaking. First impression for people arriving from the south or even Charlestonians entering the city, this monolith will dominate the view. No soft sense of arrival here, no attractive architecture to give a sense of what is to come. It is dominant, dark, and foreboding almost. We have a high profile garage to boot. Growth must come, but the concrete structures flying up around the city will be a legacy of this era, a very sad one, something the city will not recover from. There's talk of sidewalks, tourism. Sarah Beardsley at 11 Bennett Street. I'm opposed to this plan as presented due to the aesthetic height and density of the space, which is not in keeping with the Charleston design. Lynn Hanlon, 67 Meeting Street. I oppose the design as presented. The prominence of this site is important to the gateway of Charleston, and whatever is being built, there needs to have the highest standard of design and material, and what is being proposed does not meet those standards. Ledley Bell, 498 Albemarle Road. I oppose this project as presented. This is one of the gateways to our city, and the design and materials do not fit. I would like the project to be deferred until more public input can be heard. Allison Hazel, 105 Kimberly Terrace. Calling from Greenville, I belong to the Preservation Society. I oppose this hotel as presented and agree that the proposal should be denied. Height and aesthetic are not in order. Preservation of the city of Charleston, as I see these changes, are ruining the character of the city. Wendy Wellen, 126 Trad Street, oppose the project and would like it to be denied as presented. Carolyn Marsland, Society Street, I am opposed to the presentation as submitted. Building is too futuristic and it doesn't blend with the current surroundings. It doesn't invite a warm welcome to our lovely city. Sarah Donham, 1 King Street. Since the Ashley River Bridge is where many people enter the city for the first time, this building and parking garage does not give a correct feeling of what Charleston is. I oppose this building complex as the way it looks. Jane Jellich, 49 Held Circle. 11 stories is awfully tall for this part of town. The design lacks character. It could be anywhere in the United States. Charleston needs to maintain its commitment to quality design, materials, and local ambiance. This building and garage are not welcoming. They are cold and sterile. Please vote no to this submission. The project needs more public input for approval. Margaret O'Halloran, 3073 Penny Lane. The proposed project has an opportunity to completely change the dimension of that area of Cannon and Spring. Currently, the stretch is a perfect example of dilapidated concrete ugliness left behind from an era when the space was uncared for and unimportant. Arguably, that space is a great way to the Citadel, the Burbank Park, William USC, the River Dog Stadium, or with a reverse direction, it is the welcome map to our city. The proposed architectural renderings does nothing to demonstrate a desire to make that place more beautiful or emulate the existing architecture of Charleston. We have to demand the highest level of structural beauty, or else we're leaving that place just as ugly as it is. Elaine Doyle, 8 Radcliffe Place. I recommend that you deny these applications. The design and size is totally inappropriate for this important piece of property. This is one of the gateways into our city, and we need something that is architecturally inviting and attractive. Elizabeth Cahill, Ladson Street. This project should be denied. It is yet another example of developers' abuse of PUDs Charleston does not need another hotel with parking garage, particularly as unattractive as this. We need more housing. Since the zoning has already been approved, now was in purview, was in design. I feel the design is sterile and driven by corporate interpreters rather than by aesthetic considerations or neighborhood context. The materials appear to be value engineered, and the overall presence on the peninsula, on that part of the peninsula, promises to be highly uninviting. Charleston Cannon must do better. Please deny this project and do not let another ugly building rise in our city. And that concludes the written public comment. And I will turn it over to either Mr. Dowd or Mr. Howell.
Well, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Dennis.
Okay, I got back in on a hotspot, so I think I'm okay. But if you lose me, I'm going to ask Alex Howell to continue. But start out by pointing out, as somebody did in one of the letters, that this is a plan unit development, a PUD, developed with the planning commission with the planning division of the city and approved by city council. The parameters of the PUD were established a few years ago, and as such, the site layout and height are dictated, although the BAR does have the ability to reduce the height, but only by a half story. Staff feels the project needs to be more related to the architecture and character of Charleston. There is too much of a branding approach to its execution. We have no issues with the height and mass of the project and believe, they're fairly well conceived, but the general architectural direction is trendy and really could be located anywhere in the country. It will be an important gateway building, as has been pointed out, that we are concerned will look dated fairly quickly. Contemporary versus traditional is not the issue, but if it's contemporary, it needs to speak more to Charleston. The Aquarium building is a good example of a contemporary building that fits well in Charleston. The Spectator Hotel and the Dewberry Hotel are the better precedent images than West Edge for this project. The concept of movement in the facades is not working and is unrelated. It appears very busy and chaotic. It's also disconcerting to have so much mass sitting on glass curtain wall. The 6-story mass with its deep set windows, we feel is more successful and related. Study continuing that language to the taller structure. Generally, the material out is good quality, and raising the grade to conceal back of house the west side of the project at the park is a good solution. We're recommending conceptual approval for the height and mass. Height is dictated by the PUD, but we're recommending denial of the general architectural direction and feel that they need to completely reconsider the general architectural direction for the project. That's it.
Thank you,
Did
Mr.
you hear
Dowd.
all that, David?
I got all of it. I hope everybody else did. Mr. Gow or Mr. Rendering, do you have any response or clarification, public comment, or city staff comment and recommendations? And this time frame will be limited to 5 minutes.
Thank you. Clearly, it's been a long time since people have had a chance to comment at the BAR, and this is a much needed opportunity for public discourse on such an important issue. And I appreciate the attention that our community has towards architecture. I wasn't exactly sure if I captured Mr. Dowd's recommendations because he kind of broke up. I wonder if that could be repeated or if you wrote it down, if it could be restated.
Are you looking for the recommendation or all of the comments?
Just the recommendation.
Yeah, we were recommending conceptual approval for the height and mass. The height is dictated by the plan unit development, but denial of the general architectural direction, expecting a complete relook at the general architectural direction of this project.
Okay, so in general, height, scale, mass would mean the shape of the building, the width of the building.
Height and mass.
Height and mass, okay. It's mostly the skin that you're concerned with.
It's the architectural expression, not just the skin.
Right.
The architectural expression of the project.
Got it. So I would say simply that the materials are of a very high quality. They are stone and brick and large glass pieces. And I think anything that we would do here would meet that criteria that we are presenting. This is clearly not attempt at a branded project because ALOF recognizes clearly that they want the projects in their places to follow the brand of the city or the context. If you would look at slide 7, it's very clear that one of the most important things that we have to achieve here is something that works both with this large development called West Edge, which is very contemporary, and this large development on the south, which is called B Street Lofts. They are absolutely different from one another, and yet they are both in Charleston, and they are over 250 feet apart from them. And we are but a 70-foot sliver in a landscape, we hope, in the middle of that. So I would expect that the idea of context is one of a building in a landscape and less one of an urban wall. And I think you all get that. I'm not sure that I heard that from everybody who's commented. The crosstown is a very different place from the neighborhoods from which most of these people are speaking and from many of the projects that exist. And I think it has to respond in a way to a collective large comfort level for the people on that road, 65,000 people of them. And then the last thing, I agree that one of the renderings was a little dark, but it's our intent for the colors not to be the prevailing component of this facade, but to let the fins, the VTAC screens, the glass, and the stone to be textures. And as we work on this project and bring some of those colors together, it will feel more like a sculpture and less like a building. And I think that is the intent, is that it's part of the landscape and not necessarily something with traditional stacked windows one on top of the other. And so I would say that those are the general comments based on. And then, Dennis, we all love the aquarium. It's a very specific project. It's a civic building. It has a lot of blank area that allows the fenestrations to play off of it. And I think that because we have a lot of rooms, we are really stuck with the idea of repetition. So I appreciate the idea, and we will work diligently and would appreciate any comments from the board on direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Comments from the board?
Well, I'll lead off here and say this project has been a long time coming. I mean, we've all been watching it over the years as it's moved through the planning process. And I think the general premise of the PUD, the arrangement of the building, the massing of the building, even the building's proposed height, I think work for this site. But as staff has articulated, the general architectural direction really doesn't at all. I totally get that you're dealing with an egg crate of fenestration if you don't do this. But the thing is, this needs to be a building. It does not need to be a sculpture. It needs to be a building. Because if we try to turn it into a sculpture, then it becomes that very branded statement that a lot of people have expressed concerns about. You don't have to articulate the facades in the way you're doing in order to emphasize the height. The height is emphasized by the fact that you have an 11-story building that's 50 feet wide. You can work with this massing and completely scrap and start over on the general architectural direction and create something that fits the site, that is unmistakably a 21st century building, but would never be would never come across as scaleless as this one does. And that's probably the key issue with this facade treatment, is that it is entirely scaleless, and it will do nothing to enhance the urban nature of this part of the city. I generally agree with staff's comments and the recommendation.
So, David, I'll go next. This is James.
Yes, sir.
I think that it's very unfortunate that it's a reality, but it's unfortunate that the city of Charleston has approved the planned unit development, which seems to lead to recommendation for approval of scale and mass. And I'm not sure how we can do that when we feel it seems almost
Height and mass.
So, height and mass. Sorry, Dennis. Height and mass. When we consistently seem to be thinking that when we come across the bridge into the city of Charleston, is this the structure that we want to see? I don't think it is. I think about the great work LS3P did at the intersection of Mount Pleasant and Morrison Street with that Flatiron building. And that building's not like the aquarium. And I agree with the comments made about the aquarium also, but when I look at that Flatiron building that you're going to see when you're coming up Interstate 26 and entering Charleston, that's making a statement that I have a great deal of respect for. And I'm proud that I'm driving by it and going home. And I don't have that same feeling as I'm coming across the bridge. I'm not looking for another Flatiron building there, but I'm looking for what this site deserves. And I think I might not have the capacity to appreciate the design of that's being brought forward here for this. And someone said this earlier, I'm not sure who it was, but I would, Mr. Chairman, at the appropriate time, make a motion that we deny the application for this conceptual move.
This is Leon. Leon Scott. I truly think this from the South is truly a gateway into the city. And to me, this appears like a really strong corporate driven design, and it's not it's not architecture and suited for Charleston. So I am in agreement with the very many comments I've heard. And as I would have a hard time approving this, I would also deny the project.
I don't think I have any other comment. This is David Hazelton. I don't think I have too much to add other than from what's already been said. I would echo the comments of Mr. Metters.
So, Mr. David, are you open for a motion?
Yes, sir.
I would make a motion to deny this application for conceptual approval.
This is Leon. I will second.
Okay, so it's a motion made by Mr. Metters to deny the application for conceptual approval, which was seconded by
Leon
Mr.
Scott.
Scott.
Mr. Chair, one quick comment, if I may. It may be important as a matter within this motion to articulate either specific board comments or staff comments or both, so that the denial has adequate basis.
Yes, totally agree, Mr. White.
Well, Mr. Dowd and Mr. White, I agree with that also.
As Mr. Metters, you withdraw your current motion?
Or modify it to include comments made by staff and and board members. Sorry about that. I should have done it.
So your motion is to deny the application for conceptual approval, including comments made by staff and board members?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is there a second?
And thanks again for that, Jay and Dennis. I forgot that.
This is Leon Scott. I second.
Okay. Mr. White, how do you vote?
Yay, in favor.
Mr. Metters, what is your vote?
Yay, in favor.
Mr. Scott, what is your vote?
Yay, in favor.
And this is David Hazelton. I vote yay in favor of Mr. Metters' motion, which carries 4-0. All right.
Okay. So the next item is 194 Cannon Street, and this is the garage. It's a request for conceptual approval for new construction of a parking garage with ground level retail associated with an adjacent 175 room hotel. No particular neighborhood, Height District 85, 125 again, in the old city district. Alex, if you could go to the next slide. Same location, the garage is located to the east of the hotel building. Same site configuration. Go ahead, Alex. And we'll turn it over to the applicants again for their presentation. If you'd allow Mr. Gao and Mr. Rendering to unmute themselves.
Thank you. This is Jeffrey Rendering. If you could advance to the next slide, Alex. Same map as we talked about before. I think you can advance through that. Do you want to speak anything further on this? Okay. I think we can probably continue through this since most of this was repeated. A couple of different context images. The one on the right there is Brugger's Bagels, which is directly adjacent to the north of our site of the garage. To the left there is the Hardee's that's directly to the right, to the east of our site.
I think it's important to note that the Brugger's Bagels site is also included in the PUD for height, and it is not a part of this project, however.
Advance to the next slide, Alex. So principal design here obviously was, we'll see in the site plan is to, as we push the building up to the north of the site, to play a solid void game. On the north side there had been more solid wall. As it's so close to the site, we are not able to have openings. But where the site does came down a little triangular form, we add some openings into, which is on the left there. And on the south side is to let the building breathe with a screen element. The building is kind of lifted up on a retail ground floor, which is desired from the city. We want to keep that very light and very glassy and very open and inviting for retail. Again, we want to entice movement in the facade. As you'll see through the screening element of the garage, responds to the energy that the cars creates. And again, we set the building to the north to continue that green space to the south. If you can advance to the next slide. Some local precedents. The top right is the CTC garage up on Morrison. I believe it's under construction right now. And then the bottom right was a garage planned close to our site. And the top middle there is the mural that was planned for the CTC garage as well. We have similar aesthetic that we're trying to approach is to have a mural on the north side that is a solid wall, but to bring some art into the city. A great opportunity for a blank canvas there. Bringing the stair out, as you'll see in the massing, we wanted to bring an iconic stair out for wayfinding, but also to invite a cleaner and more desired way to use the garage and to use that to focus in as you approach from the west. Next slide, please. Site-wise, again, pushing the building to the north, we created around a 15 to 20 foot, it kind of changes throughout the site there, buffer zone for retail activity zone. Again, the client's desire is not to have retail, but since it is a requirement from the city, we want to make it and we want to do it right. And having retail up against the hard road of Cannon Street, we feel it would be unsuccessful and uninviting to be used and to expand out, since we are unknown at this time who will move into that space. It could be restaurants, it could be coffee shops, and allow that to bleed out to the south. And we had that little parcel on the north west there of the garage site. And the concept then again is to mimic the park to the west of the hotel and berm it up and to soften the building with that berm, but also bring some greenery to the site. Next slide, please. Some early sketches exploring the massing of the building, the light ground floor, the expressing the stair itself and then exploring the louvered design of the garage. Next slide, please. Floor plan, you can see that the garage is concealed with at least 30-foot deep retail spaces on the south, west, and east, with the main entrance to the east there on Bond Street, right by Brewers, which allows us to have retail space to the west facing the hotel to really activate that new access drive. Continue on. Typical floor plate with a ramp on the north, which you'll see in the elevations. The elevations respond to the program of the plate. So the north ramp side is more solid, and where we have the cars, we open more, and you can see that with louvers. If you continue on, we have 4 floors above 1 floor retail. Continue, please. One more. So looking at the south elevation, we understand, the difficulty to screen the cars, but also feel like the building is open and breathing. We understand that you can see the cars from the, straight on elevation shot, although the building will really not be experienced in this realm. The majority of the time, the building will be experienced in the vehicle traveling, 35+ miles per hour from the side, and which case, as you'll see from the section, we undulated the louvered facade to play off that energy of the car. The retail space below is lifted up high as possible to bring as much light and inviting space to that south, to the ground level. Continue on, please. At the north, where we have the solid wall, you can see we're envisioning a large mural, and where the site opens up to the right there, we would like to break down that facade to bring some more openness into the garage and have a playful nature of mimicking the louvers, but without using the louvers in this situation and having openings. Continue on, please. This is the east and the entrance of the garage on Vaughn Street. Again, you can see the louvers are wrapped around the east and west side, and then the solid concrete wall mimics the ramp beyond in the program. And the entrance is framed with a painted metal entrance, as well as the retail, which also matches the retail entrances. The base is made up of center stone, which also references back to the stone material used on the hotel. Continue on, please. This is west elevation facing the hotel. Similar materials are used again. The louvers, the brick at the ground floor relating to the hotel, painted metal frames opening, highlighting the retail spaces. And here we get to see the iconic staircase that is open and inviting and very light and airy. Continue on, please. Streetscape elevations showing what the allowable height is and where we are keeping it low. It is, as you can see on the second view there, it is lower than MUSC garage, essentially slightly lower than the little jut out of the parking garage there. Continue on, please. A section through here kind of illustrates that beautiful landscaped area that continues from the hotel site, from the park into this garage site, and softens the building. And we're proposing an oak line street there. We'll also conceal the garage a lot when those trees mature. And you can see here the undulating facade of the louvered panels. Continue on, please. Rendering from, as you approach from the west and from Cannon, we are proposing to using some bright colors to bring energy, to bring excitement, and have a kind of an edge to itself, to the modern design of this building. Again, materials relate. And you can kind of see the undulating facade there. And from this view, you can see how the cars are really concealed, and the headlights are concealed by low walls beyond. Next slide. Here you can is the view from Bond Street at the Brewer Bagel site, the existing site that's there. You get pictures of the mural as you drive past here, and as you would drive past on Spring Street. The louvers are wrapped around as well on this side. Next slide. And lastly, just a quick glimpse of the materials proposed. Aluminum louvers, keeping them really light and bright. Painted metal frames at the entrances to the garage and to the retail itself. Concrete on the north there, and then stacked brick and centered stone, which comes from the hotel as well. Thank you.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, any questions from the board?
I have one, David.
Sure.
Jeffrey, is the mural being proposed as shown or just a placeholder at this time?
Placeholder at this time. We
Thank you.
love the idea of a Shepherd Ferry as a local artist here, but right now it's a placeholder.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Hearing none, any public comment on this project?
We have the same three speakers as the last item. We'll start with Will Hamilton, and you can unmute yourself.
Thank you, Alex. This is Will Hamilton with Historic Charleston Foundation. Again, we want to thank the applicant for walking us through the proposed design ahead of this afternoon's meeting. We feel this is another design that includes some creative detailing, which results in a nice texture and interesting contemporary style. But the design doesn't seem to relate stylistically with the proposed hotel, which would be adjacent to this, to the garage building. We're comfortable with the height and mass of the design, but we feel there's a need for a common element that would help connect the garage to the proposed hotel. We're not in opposition to the contemporary nature of the design, but before it receives conceptual approval, we want to see it restudied to develop a common design element that link the two buildings. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Erin Minigan.
Thank you. Erin Minigan, Preservation Society of Charleston. The Preservation Society is also opposed to this request for an accompanying parking garage structure. Like the previous request, we feel the proposed architectural direction is inappropriate. The garage design does not attempt to respond to Charleston or reinforce the character of the city, but rather imposes itself on the context. Given the mural is not being proposed at this time, the blank concrete and brick wall wrapping around the north side of the building is highly inappropriate and exacerbates the uninviting nature of this project from Spring Street. We feel the louvered screening is an unsuccessful architectural element, and the exposed stair on the west elevation is not refined enough for such a visible primary elevation. Also, the colors being proposed are jarring and should be restudied. Finally, while the ground floor retail is positive for the program, the storefronts are too compressed to function effectively. It appears the storefront heights are only around 11 feet and recessed to where they appear dark and uninviting. We request that the board deny this application to allow full reconsideration of the architectural approach. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Ben Linhart. Let me find him. Maybe he was just commenting on the first item. I don't see him here.
All right. He's not there, Alex.
Let me just double check, but I don't see him in here.
Okay. Any other public comment?
No.
All right. Mr. Dowd?
There are no letters, Mr. Chair, on this one?
I don't see any, other than the only letters I had were from Mr. Hamilton and Ms. Minigan in the event that they weren't able to attend.
Okay.
I think most of the letters people were referring to both items, so they've already been read.
Okay. Well, again, it's part of a PUD, so that, the overall height is considerably less than it could be. Scale and mass are appropriate. We feel that the general architectural direction is better than what we saw at the hotel, but unrelated to the hotel. So I agree with Historic Charleston that they need to talk to each other and be related. Generally, the material, again, is good quality, but the screening of the garage is inadequate. View of cars and headlights will be very evident. The retail at the ground level that is open to the east is a good feature to activate the ground level of the garage. the east elevation needs more development. The normal requirements for recessing the garage entry that we normally mention will apply here and need to be considered going forward. Additional renderings of the north and south sides would have been helpful. Consider continuing grills over the blank concrete walls at the north end of the west elevation and the south end of the east elevation, or continue the long brick up those facades. Blank concrete walls are unappealing, and we don't know what the nature of the mural will be yet. Depending upon the nature of the retail, the paving at the South Plaza may need to be somewhat reduced. But we're recommending conceptual approval with those conditions noted.
Thank you, Mr. Dowd.
You're welcome.
Response or clarification from the applicant related to public or comment or city staff comment and recommendations?
Yes, thank you. This is Richard Gao. Dennis, your last comment about the paving on the south being modified. Could you explain that comment, please?
Well, as I said, depending upon the nature of the retail, whether you've got, dining outside or not, it's a pretty broad area, and it might, be better to be reduced if you don't have outdoor dining.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I think in general, the question I have, and we thought about this a lot. Many times when we do projects that have multiple buildings, there's often a desire by folks in the community for the buildings not to relate so much so as to allow them to appear as if they've evolved over time. And I'm interested in any comments that the board have related to the importance of the relation, or as though they look like they belong to one another. And I also am interested to know, in terms of the distance of the property on the north side, and any, as it relates to the fact that that needs to be a solid wall, because in parking garages, you need to have 10 feet. And if we are going to push the building away from that north property line, we will have less room to create a landscape gesture for what we feel is the larger need. The Brugger's Bagels site is something that we don't know at this time, and at this time it's an interior property line. And we feel like as designers, we should put as much emphasis on making the south side of the garage the most effective in terms of the amount of space we dedicate to it, and for the comfort of pedestrians to move away from the road. And generally speaking, the comments made by some of the members who spoke from the public, our floor-to-floor height on the ground floor is 15 feet. And we have a lot of room between now and any time of completion to work with colors. And so those are generally the comments that I would make. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any comment, discussion from the board?
Well, I'll go first, David.
Thank you.
This is James. Some of the things I heard during the presentation, that the bright colors were to bring energy and excitement to the site. And, I believe that the excitement that you get as you're traveling into the city of Charleston, as you're traveling into the city, and in that particular area needing to accent that, I'm not sure that I understand that. The excitement is entering the Charleston, and these two structures, the parking, this proposal on the parking building specifically has the backdrop of the city of Charleston, and it needs to, I believe, blend in. The question about the relationship between the two buildings, I believe it's very flexible. I believe that a successful design can achieve a relationship where the two are compatible with each other, or they're viewed as independent. still being a hotel structure and a parking structure. I think that's up to the designer. I believe that as we're looking at these two, they almost have to be looked at together, even if they're viewed differently, and not as related to each other, just for harmony of development, just as the city chose to, I guess, lump these together with the planned unit development. And I feel the same way about this project as I did about the previous one, that giving it partial conceptual approval without knowing more of the facts, I'm not in favor of.
What facts, James, are you curious about?
I'm sorry, I thought that you had suggested that it would be, again, the height and the mass would be okay, and then, or just give it conceptual approval, or maybe I should ask you to restate what you said.
Well, my recommendation was conceptual approval with the conditions that I noted.
Right, conceptual approval with the conditions noted, and I think that I would rather see this be denied conceptual approval.
Okay.
Well, I'll jump in very quickly. This is Jay. I think as a parking structure, it's probably the most ridiculously challenging building type in all of Charleston, and you have some rather familiar precedents. But I think that what you have in the siting of the building is actually really positive. I would not shift, Richard, you'd asked a direct question for our input. I would not shift the siting of the building southward. And if we end up with a blank wall, then so be it. There's one of those in your precedent studies, and that garage, which did receive BAR approval, the one on Upper Morrison, the mural became an integral part of the architecture. So it's going to be real hard for us to understand the scope of this proposal if the mural is just merely a placeholder unit. And I know typically we think of those things as signage, but in instances like this, I think the board does need to see it because it's inseparable from the architectural response up until the point that something gets built on the Brugger site that is bigger and blocks it. I think
Mr. White, can I just mention that
yeah, sure.
on the Morrison Drive garage, the mural was abandoned.
Oh, what?
In favor of a textured concrete. You may recall.
Yeah, let's drag them back in here so we can re-adjudicate that. Yeah, I guess I just forgot that part. I like the suggestion of the movement of the vertical louvers, but a vertical orientation is really challenging if you're trying to use that screening to block views into the garage. If you stick with a vertically oriented louver or screen, you're really going to struggle to mask all the guts of a garage. And it's not just the precast concrete structure, but it's the lighting and the signage and all that stuff that as a project like this progresses, we get into those details. I'm not worried about it being aesthetically separate from whatever the hotel ends up being. They are separate structures. And I think that they're intended to read that way, and I find it acceptable. I'm fine with the recommendation that staff has placed before us.
Alex, can I ask you to go to a rendering of the building? Thank you. Sorry, Leon, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that I'm okay with the conceptual approval with staff recommendation.
Okay, so in light of that, I'll introduce a motion for conceptual approval with staff comments.
This is Leon Scott. I'll second that.
Mr. White, can I ask you, would you want to include board comments since you made comments about the siting of the building that we didn't?
Oh, did y'all not? Let's see. I'm looking at the comments now. Yes, I'd like to amend the motion to be conceptual approval with staff comments and board comments regarding building siting.
Scott, I presume you would.
I will second.
All right. Mr. Metters, how do you vote?
Nay, not in favor.
Mr. Scott,
Yay in favor.
Mr. White,
Yay, in favor.
and this is David Hazelden. I would vote yay in favor.
Motion passes. Right, David?
Yes, it does. 3-1. I'm sorry.
Okay, well, thank you everybody for your time tonight, and I apologize for the earlier internet problems, but at least I got it straightened out. And
Thank you.
we'll see you
Thank
next
you.
time.
Thank
All
you.
right. Y'all have a good evening.
Thank you. Y'all have a good evening.
Thank you.